All right, so this is literally like 10 seconds apart. I didn't go review the last video to see how good the picture quality was or anything. Um, so background, got this thing way zoomed in, so every time I move, I get out of frame. My background is a long story. Let me try. I am a very long-winded person. I tend to ramble. I'm so sorry. Let me try to think of a way where to start. When I was 5 years old, no, let me think of a good starting point. Okay, so yeah, okay, I am going to start when I'm like 5 years old. Okay, when I was like 9 or 10, a lot of my family members. I grew up in a small town, and trucking was. I don't know if it was a common profession, but it was common in my family. And a lot of the people who did well in my family were truck drivers. And I really looked up to a couple of my relatives who were truck drivers. I thought the trucks were amazing. And when I was about 9 or 10, that's what I wanted to do. And that didn't really change all throughout high school. And I remember, I don't know if they still do this kind of stuff, but I remember there was this little quiz that you would take, a personality test that would tell you what kind of job would fit you. And I basically put everything on there that I really don't like people. I don't like being around people. I like being by myself. And it recommended truck driver. So I was like, well, that's what I wanted to do anyway. Uh, but then I got out of high school, 18 years old, and there wasn't really much in the way of truck driving jobs at 18. I know that you can do intrastate at 18, but I needed a job quick. I didn't have much in the way of funds to get a CDL, and it wasn't really an option. It was just way too much of a pain. So I had to go get a normal job. I got a tech support job, among others. I worked a lot of jobs. Is a lot of jobs, and well, maybe not like not a lot of jobs, but not one or two. Um, but I ended up getting into tech support mainly, and then uh, I moved with some friends to another state. And what did I do then? I had difficulty finding another tech support job there that paid well, and I ended up going into like I bounced around on a few things. Like I sold credit cards, I sold AT&T cell phones, telemarketing stuff. Not outbound. I've never cold called. That's that's a level I would never go to. So inbound calls, people that were calling to try to buy service. I'm going to digress off into my real quick digress. Selling AT&T phones, and I don't even remember what bank it was that I was selling credit cards for, Bank One or something. And it was a sales job where you got commission based on sales, and it wasn't really a sales job. It was just how many people could you get that could pass a credit check, because almost everyone that called wanted to buy. They just like 90% of them did not pass the credit check, or uh, well, on the credit card, yeah, they just didn't pass the credit check, and that was the end of it. But on the phones, if they had really good credit, then they would get a no deposit phone. If they had, it was very rare that someone would just get flat out denied for a phone. It would typically be either no deposit or a fairly high deposit of like $500, and then a ridiculous deposit of like $800. And this was a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you my age. I'm old. So $800 back then was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money today. I'm not that old. It's not like in the 40s or something. Buy a car for $800. Um, but okay, where did I digress to? Let me get back on track. So here I was bouncing around on jobs. I ended up getting a decent job. I worked there for a couple of years, and I was bored of the job. I was just really tired of it. And I think I was 20, 21 or 22, one or the other. And I'm just really just depressed. I don't know. Depressed is a strong word. Every day I woke up, I was like, is this the day that I want to use my, time off on? Like, do I hate going to work today enough to use my time off for today to call in, or do I just need to gut it out for today and use that for a worse day? That's that was me after the alarm went off every morning, just laying there looking at the ceiling going, oh, I do not want to go into that place today. And my goal ever since that job is to get into a job where I don't dread going to work every day. And I was in that point, and it just things happened. I don't typically make big decisions like changing jobs on like one thing. It's several factors. There's a lot of things that affect my decision, especially on something like switching careers. And I I was sitting there thinking about it. I was like, what could I do? I mean, like I wasn't making amazing money, but it wasn't horrible either. It was I think I was making like $15 an hour, and this was 15 years ago. So it was pretty decent money. It wasn't great. Like, I wasn't buying a house on it or anything. And so it wasn't really easy to replace that job. So I was just sitting there thinking this wasn't just one day, it was a couple weeks. And I was thinking about other things, looking in classified ads and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, well, I could go trucking. I was like, well, I can't do that. And I thought, wait, why can't I become a truck driver? Because you have to be 21 to be a truck driver. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm taking my shoes off. And one, two. I'm like, wait a second, I am 21. I can be a truck driver now. And I went from bummed out and just not hating life. I don't want to come across as like this depressed, emo, suicidal person. It wasn't like that. I just really didn't like my job. And I went from that to being so incredibly excited. It's like, I can finally become a truck driver. The dream. So I like my mood changed entirely. And I crunched some numbers on finances, and I did some research, and within a couple of weeks, I quit my job and went to truck driving school. And where are we at? 9 damn minutes. Oh my God, I've been rambling for so long. The rest is going to be really quick. Went to truck driving school, got on with a starter company, Swift. It was horrible. It's the worst company I've ever worked for in my life. McDonald's, Old South Pancake House. I worked at those two places in high school, and both of them were better than Swift. It's incomparable. Swift is the worst company ever. Um, but I worked for them over the road. I did a dedicated account with them. I did a few things with them. I only worked there for maybe somewhere between 6 months and a year. I can't remember exactly. I know that I didn't finish out my year, so it's like 6 to 10 months, somewhere in that area. But basically, it was just constantly me threatening to quit and them trying to appease me, trying to get me to not quit. And I left there and I did line haul for a little over a year with another company. And then I went back over the road with a very small company of like less than 50 trucks. And I ended up quitting the trucking industry after them because I worked for three bad companies. I had issues with all of them. By far, Swift was the worst. Like, everything was an issue with Swift. Um, the main like issue is it's a job. You're there to make money, and I didn't make any money with Swift. I had checks of like $300 a week with Swift. With Conway, which was the line haul company I worked for, um, I don't think they exist anymore. I think they were bought out by XPO. It was Conway Western Express. Now I know that Conway Express exists now, but I don't think it's the same company. I think it's like an offshoot of the line haul company. I think the line haul company is now XPO, but I was making like 65,000 a year with them. And then the last OTR company that I was driving for, I was making somewhere between 80 and 90,000. I didn't work a full year, so it was just projections based on my average weekly paychecks. And I want to say my average weekly paychecks were like 1,500 a week. But I was making like 42 cents a mile, but I was averaging 4,000 miles a week. Let me bust out my calculator real quick. 4,000 times 0.42, that's 1,680 times 52, that's 87,000 a year. And that's not including extra pay of meeting, like safety and fuel and stuff like that. There were a bunch of other pay on top of that. And 4,000 miles per week was about my average. I had weeks where I had so many miles, I had to go in and I had to double check my logbook. Like, there's no way that I could have done that many miles, like 4,500 miles in a week. And I had to go back because I lied like crazy on my logs. If a DOT inspector, see, I knew the logs really well. I knew the logging really, really well. DOT, whenever they would look at my logbooks, because I used all the rules. You could do, you could do sleeper splits back then. You can't do that anymore. They have the 2/8 split now, but back then it was basically anything 2 hours or greater. And anyway, it would take me. I'm already way over 10 minutes. It's gonna be like a 20-minute video. But I think a lot of the DOT inspectors were confused by my logs, and they just gave up. Like, I never had a thorough log review. If they would have thoroughly reviewed my log, if they would have gone back like 6 weeks on my logs, they would have seen that I had a 60 mile per hour average. If they would have just divided my miles by my hours driven, they would have found out that it was almost exactly 60 miles per hour average all the time. Because if I got stuck in traffic or anything else happened, I just went back in and changed my log to get that time back. And that's what allowed me to drive crazy amounts of miles every week. Yeah, I don't think under new ELDs, which I'm not very familiar with, I've just heard of them, I don't think I could run 4,000 miles a week. Not unless it was like the most amazing drop and hook ever. But yeah, I had weeks that were absolutely absurd. I had to go back and double check my logs. I was like, well, that is legal somehow, some way. I mean, I know it's not legal, like I lied on the logs, but technically it's legal. So yeah, I had a couple of weeks like that where I had to double check it. But I was making decent money. So money wasn't the issue with the last two jobs I had in trucking. It was all kinds of stuff. It was, so with Swift, it was basically everything. Swift was just like a crap company. It was the worst company imaginable. well, maybe not. I've heard bad things about other companies that I won't mention because I don't have any firsthand experience with. But I've heard other trucking companies are as bad, if not worse, than Swift. Conway Western Express was the issue with them was they were, well, this was a common issue with all of the trucking companies. They were always pushing me to do illegal things. I was already doing a lot of illegal things, and they were pushing me to go even beyond that. Like I was lying, like I was probably working 100 plus hours a week, and they were pushing me to do more hours than that. And with Conway, they really pushed you to your 14 every single day. I can't count the number of times that I rewrote my logs so I could just make it home, because I would, get 30, 45 minutes away from home and I'd be out of hours, and I would have to get creative with my logs to get some time back on there so that I didn't have to sit and, have somebody come pick me up 45 minutes away from the house. Conway it was really hard work, and you were working the entire time. I mean, you was hard work all day, every day, 14 hours, 5 days a week. I mean, you did your full 70 every, 5 days. You had weekends off. Occasionally you would get stuck somewhere and you have to stay in a hotel or whatever. But mainly with Conway, it was just so high stress, high speed. Everything was there was no leeway on time. When they gave you your bills, and you had to run out the door and go hook up your trailers and tear off out of there to get to the next terminal. And then it was just, everything was a rush. It was really high speed. So it was incredibly stressful, and working 14 hours a day, 5 days a week. By the time the weekends rolled around, it was just sleeping all weekend. So plus my route was probably one of the toughest routes in the country. It was between Reno and Sacramento, across Donner Pass. It was an incredible amount of chaining and driving in snow up and down mountains. It was not fun. And then the last job I had was mainly hazardous waste contracts, but I think they were running the spot market, because I had rolling with Swift. I had you deal with like Swift had contracts, so I pulled a lot of the same freight over and over. And it was like they had the worst damn contracts. Kmart, Tires Plus or something like that. It was almost all driver unloads. Oh my God, I hated unloading trailers. And they paid you like $80 to unload the trailer, which was not worth it. It was horrible. Dollar General, or was it one of those dollar stores? I can't remember which one. But they paid like $200 to unload one of those trailers. I only did maybe 2 of those deliveries, but the Kmart people, you would have between 5 and 20 people come out for a Kmart unload, and none of them would get in the trailer and help me unload. They would all just set out at the end of the conveyor, and no Kmart had a damn dock. So it was a full hand unload. Oh, those were the most horrible unloads. But Dollar General, man, they only had like 2 or 3 employees, and those employees would get in there and bust their butt and unload the thing. Like they told me on one of the deliveries that, they could get it themselves. If I didn't want to help out, I didn't have to. And I got paid $200 for those unloads. That was pretty nice money back then. Well, that was pretty nice money for Swift. When you're making $300 a week and you get $200 for a single unload, wow, that's going to be an amazing check. I might break $500 this week. So the last company, the reason I left them was because it was a really small company in which I was basically an owner operator. What I say by owner operator is that I was doing all of the back end office work stuff. Well, not all of it, but most of our contracts were hazmat, so it's a lot of extra permits. And I was having to do all the permitting, even though they had a full-time permit person. She was really lazy, incredibly lazy. And it was not just that I had to do all the permits, which involved me calling ahead to every state that I would drive through and asking them if I had to have a special hazmat permit for their state, and most of them did require it. And then you technically, I don't think you can drive in the state without the hazmat permit, but the DOT said, well, as long as you stop at the first DOT inspection station and buy it there, we won't ticket you. I'm like, all right, that'll work. But it was a lot of time spent dealing with permitting, which I shouldn't have had to deal with. They had a permit person to deal with that stuff. That wasn't my job. What were some other things I had to deal with? Repairs. They only had one terminal in Phoenix. They didn't really want to work on anything outside of Phoenix. And they had a lot of issues with their credit accounts. So anytime I would go somewhere to try to charge it to one of their accounts, it would get rejected. And they would just tell me to pay for it out of pocket and they would reimburse me. So I'm working for a company that all their stuff is bouncing. Everybody's telling me, no, their money's no good. Like all their accounts are maxed out or their credit's no good here. They wouldn't give me details, but it all got rejected, all of their accounts. And they would just tell me that they would reimburse me. Well, I was spending a lot of money, probably an average of $500 a week on maintenance, repairs, permits, lumpers, the list goes on and on and on, that I was spending out of my own personal pocket, not comm data checks, not, like I was paying cash or writing a check for it or using my personal, credit card, debit card, whatever, and keeping receipts. And I got authorization every single time that I did any of this stuff. And every week it was like a 2-hour long debate to get them to pay me or reimburse me for this stuff when I submitted all of the receipts and I got approvals. And it was horrible. It was like they would try to nickel and dime me on absolutely everything. They fought me on reimbursements for everything, even when they flat out told me that they would cover it. Just absolutely ridiculous stuff. Like my, what was it? The thing that automatically turns the truck on and off to, you have the temperature controls in the sleeper. Well, mine was disabled and my truck wouldn't idle for more than like 3 minutes. So for the first month I had the truck and I started there in the winter, it was like -0. It's like -10 degrees, -15 degrees up in Montana, and my truck won't run for more than 3 minutes. And my thermostat stuff in the back that's supposed to, the Opti idle or whatever it is, that's supposed to turn it on and off when you set a temperature, didn't work. And I found out real quick how crap the insulation is on these trucks. I could get it up to 120 degrees in the truck by sitting there, hitting the throttle and keeping the thing running for 15 minutes. And within 15 minutes of that thing turning off, it would be like 30 degrees in that truck. So I wasn't sleeping for like the first month I was in there, and they wouldn't pay to fix it out on the road. They wanted to fix it at their terminal, like everything. So they finally, after a month, got me back to their terminal. And my Volvo that I had was so new. When I got it, it had like 1,500 miles on it. It was brand new. But it was so new. It was one of the newest in their fleet that their equipment, their thing that they hooked up to it to change those types of settings, didn't work. Their equipment wasn't new enough. So I ended up having to go to a Volvo dealership anyway. I could have done that somewhere else. And I got there and they tried like 3 different credit accounts and Volvo told me that their money was no good. So yeah, I had to pay for it out of pocket, even though it was like 5 miles away from the terminal in Phoenix. So because I was paying for it, they said, well, what do you want done? And I said, well, turn on those controls in the back and turn off that idle shut off crap. It's where it'll idle as long as I want it to. And also the governor was set at like 60 miles per hour. And they said, well, after 3 months, we'll bump it up to 65. But, we'll have to wait for 3 months. I think I've been there for a month at this time. And I did get dispatch approval to, I did not get dispatch approval to turn the idle off, but since I was paying for it out of, I was getting reimbursed hopefully. But I did get approval bumped up to 65 2 months early. I wouldn't do that without approval. But yeah, I did turn off the damn idle. The idle shut off. But yeah, that was just a small sample of the issues I had with them, and I just got tired of it. There were, oh my goodness, 25 minutes. All right, so that was not quite the last company I worked for. The last company I worked for was a friend that I played a video game with, and he was the manager for a bunch of companies in Dayton, Nevada, which is I think like 60 miles southeast of Reno, where I lived. And he told me, he promised me a job. I told him like the minimum amount of money I needed to make in order to pay my bills, and he said, "Oh yeah, no problem, no problem, we got you." And so I quit that over the road job, went to work for him, and it was not enough money. And I worked there for like a month, and then I found out how much everybody else there was making, and I was making a lot more money than everybody else. Like department heads were making between $2 and $5 an hour less than me, and I was not making very good money. Well, I mean, it was decent, but it wasn't enough. Like I couldn't pay my bills. I was constantly falling behind. It was a huge pay cut for me because I had been making over $60,000 a year for like the last 2 or 3 years. So I had bills that were, you know, I was not, it wasn't good enough. But I kept falling further and further behind, and I just decided to leave the trucking industry entirely at that point. Got back into, I got into another job, tried that out. I thought there might be money in it, and there was no money in it. And I thought, well, what the hell can I do to make ends meet? So I got back into IT, and I've been doing that ever since with the same company. That's where I'm at right now. And I'm bored with the job. There are a lot of reasons that I want to leave the job. But mm, I'll save the rest of it for the next video. But I don't make decisions for one or two reasons. There's several reasons, but I plan on leaving my current job and getting back into trucking. So next video, why am I getting back into trucking? We'll call this one here.